Well done, Euron! Men, be cold as malice, hard as duty. Let us show the cattle of Garth the strength of Curiosity's sons.
Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Justin Rose, and I'm the author of the fantasy series, Tales of Rehavan. Currently, I'm working on the production of a full-cast audio drama titled The Fall of Ingway. The sound design is by Daniel Bell, and the original soundtrack is by Michael Hyman. Today, we'll be interviewing Eden Gabay, another actor from the cast. The music you currently hear, and which will close out the segment, is The Song of Roland by Michael Hyman. Enjoy! I'm Justin Rose, author of the project, and you are?
Eden Gabay is my name.
All right, good to meet you, Eden. And you played primarily Melisahn and Vanity, and then some of the bit parts here and there also. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
That's a very good question. I can't accurately answer it because I've been from a great many places. I'm Australian. The accent may not suggest that, unbelievably. It's definitely more of the British set, but I have lived in England for a very, very brief period of time, and I just happened to pick up the accent and use it in my day-to-day speech. But I live in New York now, and I have for the past 7 years now.
Cool. It's kind of been all around then. I have one other Australian in the cast. He plays
My gosh.
Ingway, but
Ooh,
other than that, it's
with,
all
with the accent, out of curiosity.
no, it'll be more of a kind of traditional British accent,
I
like kind of
see.
mixing with the rest of the cast. But yeah, he's from Australia.
Do you know where in Australia he's from, out of curiosity?
I couldn't say in particular yet. I only know that much because of his profile. I haven't spoke to him in person yet, just exchanged
Well, there you go.
messages. So
Because look, there are certain parts of Australia I know where certain British accents come a little easier. So where I'm from, this sort of weird posh version comes fairly easy, and I'm not even a little bit posh, which is the interesting part of all that. But if I were
voice,
to,
well, definitely didn't give that. Like I was thinking posh all the way.
yeah, thanks. You know, I take it. But no, my family are farmers and all that. It's nothing wild. But if I were to speak with my Australian accent, it would certainly suggest that it's a little bit more working class. Although I have a speech thing where I struggle with my nasals, just can't do them for some reason. Never have really been able to do them. And when I speak with my Australian accent, it tends to shift a little bit more into the politician area. So yeah, if I were to do it right now, I'd be sounding a little bit more like this when I'm not trying to do anything in particular special, and because it resides in the bass range and the nasals are very weak, it sounds like somebody who's running for office in the Liberal Party in Australia, and they certainly aren't very marketable these days, the Liberal Party. Although the Labor Party, yeah, certainly need a little bit of work themselves. Is the sort of thing that
It's
we
really interesting. I bet it's helpful with your acting to have that background of kind of like multiple exposures to accents, living in Australia, then living in the UK, then New York.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and especially because the English speaking world as an industry is effectively one place now. There are little interesting things that you have to do with visas and all that, but in terms of work, we have the ability. So the guy who's playing Ingwe is an Australian, presumably in Australia right now, and you have people definitely from England in the cast, and evidently people from America right now also in the cast. That is a sea change from the way that it would have been many, many years ago now. Because you think about the sort of cross-Atlantic productions of 100 years ago, and you think of the fact that Claude Rains was inexplicably in a film with someone like Jimmy Stewart in it, or Humphrey Bogart, more famously for Casablanca, and you go, "Wow, gee, that doesn't seem to make any sense at all." But these people just happen to find themselves in the crossroads of the world, of which some of them happen to be from one city, and then one of them happens to be from a very, very distant place, but a specific part of a distant place. I know that a lot of people came from rural Pennsylvania who made it in the early days, and inexplicably.
it's kind of cool living nowadays. Like there's access like there never has been before in history. Like, I mean, my background, is not related to the film industry or the audio industry or anything like that, but it's something
Sure.
that I really enjoy. And I love writing, and I have more of a background in writing. And so to have the resources to be able to just go online to these, talent websites and locate people like yourself and like the sound designer and composer I'm working with is just a privilege that has, never been there before. And it's delightful to be able to have that access.
Sure, in look in Wisconsin, look, there are very talented people in Wisconsin. I know many, but it's kind of harder to cobble that together, especially
Yeah.
in an art form that doesn't really require it. And especially for something that necessitates the British set almost, it would be very hard to do this piece. And I tried to do a couple of characters in American as like the tests, and it just simply wasn't working in any way. Um, like
Fantasy
we'll
has
see.
kind of been pigeonholed with a very, very like old world Eurocentric feel and aesthetic. And it's not always necessary, obviously, like particularly when you decide on something alternative to go all out on, it works. But for most productions, I find that just like leaning into the European and particularly the British sound, it's hard to go wrong with.
Yes, despite the fact that the actual period that it's sort of based off of, because there aren't mobile phones in this particular world, even though it's fantasy, it is based on the medieval sentiment. They would have sounded remarkably un-British, even in Britain,
Yeah.
because it would have been entirely in original pronunciation, which would sound a little
Before
bit
the great
closer.
vowel shift and all that. Yeah.
Yes, yes, the beautiful non-roticism that we currently live in right now. But I don't mind it. It's just a bit piratey, really, is the issue with it.
So
Um,
how did you start acting? Like what got you into it?
I was forced into it. Really, it was a
For
terrible.
shame.
No, I a little bit like that. I sort of was taken to a drama class with because I wasn't particularly sociable, and I was an Orthodox Jew growing up, and I it was really the only way to express myself in that sort of way, and I did fairly well at it in Australia. There's a thing called the Eisteddfod system in Australia. It exists a little bit over here, but not to the same extent. And you sort of do competitive acting. So you start off by reading poetry against other people, and whoever reads it the best wins. And then you get to write your own poetry and recite that. And then you get to do a monologue from a known piece. And then you get to do something called a championship, which is to say, you do a poem that you find, a monologue, a piece that you write, and then you sort of compile it into a larger speech, and it becomes almost a one-person show. And I won that, and at that point I sort of went, yeah, this could be something to do. It was very awkward though, because it was McDonald's sponsored that competition, and I was still an Orthodox Jew, and the prize was a lot of McDonald's, and I couldn't eat McDonald's at the time.
Right. That is
So
an irony.
it was horrid, yeah. I mean, and it expired too. They didn't say, okay, redeem it when you come to your senses, as I would. But no, I sort of had to give that away, and that was a cheery day. It was very disappointing when I tried McDonald's eventually. For the
Yeah,
first
you
time.
you weren't missing much. Like,
No,
I
I
mean,
wasn't. I owe to be back in those days. Owe to be back. But then I went over here and I studied at Tisch and did that sort of line of things, and that reinforced the British accent a little bit more than the
okay.
Australian, which I came in with.
Nice. Yeah, my next question was going to be like what kind of training you did. So I guess if you wanted to expand on that any, feel free.
Well, yeah, look, uh, it was primarily done at Tisch, though, at school I owe a lot to my first drama teacher who kind of got me into the Eisteddfod system. But with Tisch, it was very much a story of how it changed as it went on of little classes. I was enrolled into the experimental theatre wing initially for the first 2 years. You have to do a major studio when you get in, and it was not intuitively what I would have been good at, because it's physical theater. And obviously, you know, I'm doing a lot of voice acting now. It's not that necessary to know how to do a somersault. But there's a way of kind of using the mentality of getting yourself physically into a role that I have retained from those days. I then went into classical theatre, did Shakespeare plays, and then I went to the film course, which was fine. And then I finished with the from people who did ETW. They did a course in Amsterdam called the International Theatre Workshop, which is, I actually think, the best course I have ever taken in anything. It was just remarkable at how much synergy that provided in such a compact period of time. And I think that sort of made me want to take more risks with what I'm doing, and allows me to play. I'm playing primarily in the vocal world right now with how I'm doing that. But you know, even in person, it's more a matter of going, okay, make a big choice. And if that big choice happens to be terrible, at least you go out fighting.
Go. That's really cool. Yeah. As far you mentioned the kind of that physical mentality letting you commit to things. And I will say, like, the character you play, Melisahn, he's involved in probably a lot more physical scenes than most characters in the story. And it was nice, like, say when he was shouting in a battlefield or something, that you let yourself go into that very well. Like, a lot of the people who did auditions and sent in recordings were very, very hesitant to get much of volume. So they would do stage shouting for the effects and stuff, but very, very dialed back to the point where it didn't hit as hard. And I was
Right.
very appreciative of
When
how
you're
you were
right,
able to.
when you're right up against it, it's very hard to go full on because of the peaking on the mic system. I
Yeah.
learned this from self producing with my audiobook stuff that I did before this. But the way that I found to get around it, which allows you to play a little bit more, is you literally cover the mic in a thick blanket, and then you have a very echoey room and you do whatever you want, and it will get through. So that's what I
Cool.
did. So, no, I wouldn't attribute that to the training. I would attribute that to just getting a bit luckier with the production side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I really appreciate about your performances too was this probably comes from all the audiobook stuff you did, was you did multiple voices with very different sounds, but maintained like clear diction and clarity with it. That was
Yes.
something that really was a big factor in why I hired you for the roles, was just the clarity, because the production requires, sound effects and music and multiple people sometimes talking over each other. And like, that really stood out to me with all of your reels, that I could always tell what you were saying very clearly. So that was helpful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I mean, that's why I love doing audiobooks. On that topic, actually, it's kind of an interesting thing. The essence of the voice actor who does many voices. The reason why Mel Blanc, who I'm not even remotely as good as, was so effective was because he managed to do probably 70 different colors that sounded remarkably unlike himself. Or his core voice certainly, and unlike each other as well. You would be very easily fooled into thinking that even Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny, who obviously shared many scenes together, were very much played by different actors.
Yeah.
I don't have that as much. It's clearly me who's doing it, but it is a different color of my voice, which is sort of the way that it perhaps ought to be done these days, just because there are a lot of actors out there and there are a lot of good actors out there today. So I think in sort of full cast little audio things these days, you're probably not going to get away with playing more than 3 or 4 guys who are genuinely very distinct from each other.
Yeah, I tried to pare down my uses of actors for multiple roles beyond, like, obviously, in a cast this size, there's 120 something roles in all, but a lot of them are like single line pieces. So,
Yeah.
like, for those, obviously, just disperse them among everybody and it doesn't hurt anything. But for the actual roles that had any amount of substance, I always tried to max it out at two. Like
Yeah.
you have, Melisahn and Vanity, who are both pretty prominent, but I think they only share screen time once, though.
No, it's also one of the ones that if it's very obviously me who's doing them both, they have a kind of an interesting thematic connection with each other in that the climactic death of one, which is utterly surprising, I won't say who, but is intrinsically linked to the other. And sort of the way that one obsesses over the other is just very interesting to have done by the same actor. There's a Pinter play called The Lover, which I did, where there are two characters sort of played by the same actor. And the fact that that is what's happening gives a very interesting effect to the audience, even if they clock it. It almost feels intentional.
Yeah, makes things look more clever than they actually are
Yes,
sometimes.
absolutely.
Uh,
It goes, whoa, that's a big choice that he just made there. Why is he making that choice?
You said pentaplay. What does that refer to?
Harold Pinter would be his
Oh,
name.
okay, then
Yeah,
gotcha. The
my
playwright. All right.
non-roticism has unfortunately dogged me there in the pronunciation department. But no, the
Oh,
great playwright Harold Pinter.
I was assuming it was like a five-scene play or something based on the. It sounded like one word, like pentaplay. I was like, oh, is that
Uh,
like a specific
if
format or something?
only Pinter wrote one-act plays that even went to five scenes.
Gotcha.
He's very much a 2-3 scene sort of man. The Dumb Waiter is, I think, literally just the one scene.
Okay.
But I love his stuff.
So of the parts you played in this, which one did you enjoy more?
Of the main two, oh, that's interesting. Well, it depended on the moment, really. I think that they were pretty even throughout in terms of enjoyment. There was more peaks and troughs to Melisahn's character, but I think that um, the agony of the voice of Vanity, also with joy and this acidulous nature to him, is just fascinating to me conceptually, and is very, very fun to do for my voice in particular because it's quite different from my speaking voice. Melisahn is also different from my speaking voice. It sounds younger than I do just generally. But
Kind of that traditional young heroic figure, like yeah.
yes, like I don't know. I mean, the most prominent version of that would probably be Talion in the Shadow of Mordor games
Mm.
that sort of made it out. But I think that the fact that he's quite physical and also has a longer arc than the immediate guy in the midst of a war thing drew me to that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, so like as far as actual word count goes, like they're not the two most prominent roles, but as far as narrative goes, they both form very, very pivotal um portions of the arc. Melisahn is essentially the human protagonist, and Vanity is essentially the godly antagonist. Even though Ingwe is, the main character, his story kind of like wraps around Melisahn's story, and Melisahn's story kind of carries the weight of a lot of the narrative. So it was a very vital role. So
It's
yeah,
true. I mean, look, if you weren't telling it the way that you're telling it, then, if you were to do it as like a Homer was writing on this, let's say, then Melisahn would be significantly more prominent in terms of word count. But the way that you're telling it is what I actually love about the piece the most, which is to say, can you get through a story about a war and the lives within a war by depicting it around people's encounters with death, and
yeah.
also the encounters of other deities with death as well. And
I,
that centrally necessitates a character like Ingwe and little characters around him who sort of have their moments with Ingwe,
yeah.
to tell it narratively.
Structurally, the reason this became an audio drama rather than a novel, because I've written other things set in this world, and they've all been novels.
Sure.
But structurally, this one became an audio drama because I was like, I want to tell the story of gods, and gods don't really have much downtime, much like basic, like um contemporary homely scenes. It's very hard to write that. effectively and maintain interest. So I wanted a format that would more be able to move from peak to peak. And I was like, well, an audio drama or a play, that's the necessity of that format. That's what that format needs. So it's like the story and the format needed each other. And I was very glad that it was able to work out that way. Um, but yeah. So if there was another role aside from the two that you did play in there, was there anyone that appealed to you particularly that you're like, I would have liked that one?
It was cast already, but the narrator, because I like narrating,
Okay, yeah,
is
yeah. Hence
is
the
is
audiobook background.
yes, it just gets easier every time you do it. Because look, with a character like Melisahn going through what he's going through and Vanity going through what he's going through, you need a number of takes to be able to kind of pare it down, and then ultimately after editing, which I don't have to do, thank God for this one, it's just primarily paring it down to the most usable takes. But you guys can Frankenstein it basically in the edit, which is to say you use a little bit from one take and a little bit from another. You do what they did with Willem Dafoe in American Psycho. And it kind of vary the performance a little bit. With the narrator, I found that genuinely, and I don't know if this is good on me or shame on me as an actor, but I find that the first take, with very very few exceptions, is just genuinely an amazing read for a narrator, because it's very much you're going through it at the same time as the audience or the person who, if they opted to read the book aloud themselves, would be going through, and it's a very authentic experience. And also the story is fundamentally good, and the narrator experiences it more than anyone else. I mean, Ingway in a different way experiences it, but I would say, yeah, I'd have gone with that if I had open season on anything.
It's interesting you say that about the takes because of most of the actors sent in, several takes of each thing, to kind of make sure there was something usable that mixed with the other actors. The narrator did only send in one take of everything, and it was excellent. Like he did
Yeah,
a just fan like the narrator. I can't say enough good things about the guy. Crispin Holland was his name, and he did an excellent job. And he only ever sent one take of everything, and it all sounds good. It all worked. So
yeah, because when it's a piece like that, you sometimes use more than one take and just edit it. But yeah, it just trips along, especially when the prose is good, and the prose was good.
I appreciate that. So moving away from this particular project, things you've done in the past or that you have upcoming or anything, are there any that you look at and you're like, I am really proud of this thing and I'd love to share it with anybody who would listen?
Well, I just did a book called New Haven, which is a sort of dystopian, the first book in what's probably going to be a larger dystopian series, and I was very happy with that. It makes some bold decisions in the writing, things that I disagree with, but respect so much that I can't recommend it enough. In that
Interesting
sense,
recommendation.
yeah, I disagree with in the sense that I wouldn't have gone there, but I'm glad he did, and I'm glad
That's
that I got to read it.
that is a very intriguing recommendation for something. I think I actually listened to a clip of that when I was looking at your Audible profile and stuff, looking at
Yes,
some of the work
on
you've done. I'm
ACX.
pretty sure I listened to some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, my free sample is, I think, the first chapter from that, and also a climactic chapter, but sort of in the midst of things. I had a lot of fun with that.
Very cool. So where can if people like your performance in here and they want to like hear more of your stuff, where's a good place to just look up your work in general?
So if you want to retain me as a voice actor, let's say, then look, you're probably going to get more out of going to the ACX profile if you're an audiobook person. The e-audio profile, also audiobook centric, but I can kind of work with other things too. So I've had volumes of poetry sent to me via that, and it's also nice because I don't have to edit it. So you use someone who's very professional. The backstage profile is pretty good too, but also just feel free to email me just directly, and we can discuss how to do a project at large, because I like to get pretty involved in the production side of things for most projects that I
So
do.
do you have a personal website or any prominent social media or anything you use for your acting?
There's one coming, but I don't know what the domain is yet.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
So I would share that if I could. It'll be on the ACX site or the Backstage site. The
Perfect.
website.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think everybody I hired for this project, aside from the composer, is on the Backstage site. So if anybody's listening to this and they liked any of the performers on this program, they all got profiles on Backstage. So yeah, and well, thank you for coming on here, man. If I do another one of these projects, which I kind of would like to try and shoot for trying another one at some point next year, I'll for sure send you another invite because your performance was excellent, and
Thank you.
hopefully I'll be able to hear you in Rehavan again. Before you go, just a couple little friendly personal questions to let people know a little bit about you. You're
Sure.
an actor. Who is your favorite actor?
Jimmy Stewart.
Excellent choice. Love him. Favorite book or story?
Anna Karenina.
Oh,
Oh,
interesting.
Ulysses, actually. I'm gonna
Okay,
tie.
fair. And favorite movie?
Vertigo. Keeping with
That
Jimmy
the
Stewart.
Hitchcock one?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, it was absolutely fabulous to meet you, man. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thanks for coming on here and talking for a little bit. It's very helpful.
Thank you, Justin. Lovely to meet you too.
And the light of 1,000 suns shone in Roland's sword, for it had tasted the blood of dragons and burned with dragon's fire. Give me time. Not life, not survival, just time to finish. Give me time. When they come, I'll be on the walls. Remember me like this. Gods, give us time.